There's an old man called the Mississippi. That's the old man I don't like to be. What does he care if the world's got troubles? What does he care if the land ain't free?
The program you're about to see is a tribute to one of the greatest Americans who ever lived. Most people in our country today are not aware of Paul Robeson's monumental contributions because for the last 40 years, there's been a concerted effort to keep his name out of our history books. The sponsors of this show are fully aware of this great forerunner's impact in the struggle for equality of black people, for the rights of all working people, and especially his work for peace. This is a unique example that features statements from Detroiters who were fortunate enough to know this gentle giant personally. I number myself among them. Paul Robeson gave all of himself to struggle for equality, freedom, and peace. His artistry and his genius, together with his indomitable courage, established him as one of our greatest Americans. Those who still recall that soul-stirring voice, who still remember the dramatic impact of his stage presence, and who still recollect the vigor and steadfastness with which he maintained his principle, will want to join in keeping alive the spirit and memory of Paul Robeson. For those who know only his name, it's more important than ever that they become acquainted with and understand the magnificent legacy he has left. As you will hear later, Paul Robeson and I worked together in the National Negro Labor Council to dismantle the discrimination that had kept black people from their rightful place in the organized labor movement and equal opportunity in the workforce. And that's what this show is all about, regaining Paul Robeson's rightful place in American history and promoting the principle for which he devoted his life: peace, justice, and freedom.
Well, I became first aware of Robeson as a person in 1943 when he was doing Othello in New York. I was an intern at Harlem Hospital in New York at the time. And I had heard about him, but I had never been close enough to really see what was going on. So I wrangled a ticket to see Othello. And I must say that that must have been one of the highest moments in theater, to sit there and watch him and Uta Hagen and Jose Ferrer try to steal each scene from each other. And they would just wring you dry. When they finished, you almost had to sit there for a while to recover, to be able to get up out of your seat.
The efforts to silence Paul were unrelenting. Not a single concert hall would let Robeson perform. Recording companies refused to produce his records. He was banned from radio and from television. Any critic who did not attack Robeson faced the possibility of losing his or her job. Then the United States State Department canceled Paul Robeson's passport.
That was the MacArthur period, and I think the State Department had already revoked his travel papers and had already decided not to give him any more travel papers. It was a period of extreme repression of free speech and free assembly in this country. And it was a period when many of the so-called liberals and liberal organizations were running for cover. I can remember, because I was very active with a lawyers group called the National Lawyers Guild. Prior to that period, the National Lawyers Guild was regarded as the bulwark of the New Deal. Matter of fact, it was because of the New Deal that we came into existence to offset the conservatism of the American Bar Association. But the repression was such at the time you're talking about, when Paul Robeson was silenced, that even lawyers who, if there's any professional group, should have been able to stand fast in support of constitutional liberties, even lawyers were running for cover, resigning from the National Lawyers Guild, making sure that they didn't represent anyone who had been labeled. It was awfully trying times.
When I came back to New York in 1950 as a resident, he had lost favor, and they were hounding him tooth and nail. And he lived not far from the hospital, and there was a constancy of surveillance and pressure on him at the time. And I wondered, what in the world has this man done to cause such a reaction nationally against him?
Over 1,000 people were called before the House Un-American Activities Committee. Robeson himself was cited more than 200 times, more than anyone else. And he was called before the committee several times. The first time he was asked, he denied under oath that he was a communist. Afterwards, he vowed never again to answer that question, believing that such questions about a person's political beliefs were unconstitutional. Testifying before the committee, he said,
"You want to shut up every Negro who has the courage to stand up and fight for the right of his people. That is why I am here today.
Why didn't you just stay in Russia?
Because my father was a slave, and my people died to build this country. And I am going to stay here and have a part of it just like you. And no fascist-minded people will drive me from it. Is that clear?"
A lot of people whose names were identified with Robeson, or who had befriended him or with whom he had stayed, were called in. And they were also brought under surveillance, and records were made of their goings and comings. And this is what they still have against Crockett, because he went to Crockett's house often. And Crockett went to New York to prepare him for his hearings before the tribunal. I have a picture showing the two of them together in the 40s. So when you read in the Free Press the other day about this attack on Crockett, those people have memories of how he stood up for what he believed in.
I remember after one of his concerts at Hartford, we had an impromptu party for him over at my home. And my son, who is now a judge of the criminal court here in Detroit, at that time was only about 10 years of age. And he'd heard me talk about Paul Robeson, this magnificent athlete and so forth. So he wanted to stay up to see Paul Robeson after I told him Paul was coming over. But sleep overtook him and he had to go to sleep. So when Paul came, I was telling him about little George's admiration and his desire to see him. He said, "Where is he?" I said, "He's upstairs in the bedroom." Paul left me and went directly up to little George's bedroom. And the next thing all of us heard downstairs was this big, beautiful baritone voice singing to my son George. And I went up to see what was going on, and here's Paul sitting on the side of the bed, and little George sitting up in the bed just enraptured, with Paul Robeson giving him a private concert.
overwhelmed by his presence in our little house because he was such a huge person physically that made it, made us continually try to figure out how to arrange something so he would be comfortable. But he was very comfortable. He would, sometimes I come home from work because he was here for more than a week. And I'd find him racing up and down the alley playing ball with the kids and hopping over the fences. And I said to him one day, why do you feel that you should risk your life like that? I don't know who could get to you. You have the security guards on the outside on the front porch, but you're playing up and down the alley like a little kid. And he said, I don't have that freedom anywhere else. I don't have the freedom to move around among strangers. And the kids love me and I love them. And this is my form of recreation while I'm here. As long as they're delighted to play with me, I'm going to play ball with them. I'm going to teach them all the passes I know. I'm going to teach them how to play. He played a number of sports, and he was forever playing something different. Basketball, baseball, football, something. And the kids in the neighborhood got to know him and to love him, and it was really a pleasure to have him live with me during that period. My mother admonished me. She said, you brought Mr. Robeson here, but we don't have a bed long enough to fit him. So I found myself with my mother trying to figure out how to extend the bed that we offered him to sleep in. We finally made up an extra section to the bed, and so his feet wouldn't hang over. I think he was a warm human being who so obviously loved people that when you think of him and the qualities that he had, you had to think of a person who had a great deal of love for humanity, a great deal of love for the larger qualities of life.
The name of Paul Robeson is alive in Detroit thanks to the efforts of many people, included among them Detroit's own Robeson scholar, founder of the Museum of African American History, Dr. Charles Wright, who has written extensively on Robeson and houses exhibits in his museum.
Detroit also has Christopher Alston, founder of the only housing project in the U.S. named after Robeson, the Paul Robeson International Settlement, located in Detroit at Forest and the Chrysler Freeway. Dr. Thomas Batchelor, physician and sculptor, is the creator of this bust of Robeson, now housed at the Robeson Settlement. And our mayor, Coleman A. Young, seen seated here in this picture, was also a close friend of Robeson. He declared Paul Robeson weak in Detroit. Love for people, a passion for justice, and a yearning for freedom. That's the Paul Robeson that no power on earth can conceal. May we take this message with us and get on board that train for peace.
Get on board, little children, get on board, little children, get on board, little children, there's room for many a more. I hear the train a-coming, it's coming round the curve, putting on its steaming brakes and railing every nerve. Get on board, little children, get on board, little children, get on board, little children, there's room for many a more. The fare is cheap and all can go, the rich and poor alike. No second class aboard this train, no difference in the fare. Get on board and children, get on board. Get on board and children. 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 There's room for many on board. What is America to me? A name, a map, the flag I see, a certain word, democracy. What is America to me? The house I live in, a plot of earth, a street, the grocer and the butcher, and the people that I meet, the children in the playground, the faces that I see, all races, all religions, that's America to me. Place I work in, the worker at my side, the little town or city where my people lived and died, the howdy and the handshake, the air of feeling free, the right to speak my mind out, that's America. Of old Abe Lincoln, of Jefferson and Payne, of Washington and Douglas, and the task that still remains, the little bridge at Concord where freedom's fight began, our Gettysburg and Midway, and the story of Bataan. The town I live in, the street, the house, the room, the pavement of the city, or a garden all in bloom, the church, the school, the clubhouse, the million lights I see, but especially the people, that's America to me. But especially the people, that's America.